Prasada Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Chekaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Shri Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Shri Munamaya Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayam Nam Naraskicham, Naram Chaivam Narotamam, Devim Saraswatim, Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Nasta prayeshu avadireshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati tamashloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 6th chapter, text number 7. Is that where we are? Vikamo borbhuvasvascha samasya sharanasya cha sarvakama varasyapi Harisharanaspradam Vikamo borbhuvasvascha Shemasya sharanasya cha Sarvakarma varasyapi Harisharanaspradam Vikramaha forward steps. Bhuvavaha of the lower and upper planets. Svaha as well as of heaven. Cha also. Shemasya of protection of all that we have. Protection of all that we have. Sharanasya of fearlessness. Cha also. Sarvakama all that we need. Varasya of all benedictions. Api exactly. Harihe of the Lord. Sharanaha the lotus feet. Aspadam shelter. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Thus the forward steps of the Lord are the shelter for the upper, lower, and heavenly planets, as well as for all that we need. His lotus feet serve as protection from all kinds of fear. Responsively, thus the forward steps of the Lord are the shelter for the upper, lower, and heavenly planets, as well as for all that we need. His lotus feet serve as protection from all kinds of fear. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. For absolute protection from all sorts of fear, as well as for all our needs of life, we must take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, not only on this planet, but also in the upper, lower, and heavenly planets. This absolute dependence on the lotus feet of the Lord is called pure devotional service. It is directly hinted at within this passage. No one should have any kind of doubt in this matter, nor should one be inclined to seek the help of other demigods, because all of them are dependent upon Him only. Everyone, except the Lord Himself, is dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Even the all-pervading Super Soul is also dependent on the supreme aspect of Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim yatkari pataraham bande Shri Guru Diratarane. Prabhupada is emphasizing how important it is to always feel dependent upon the Lord. Rupa Goswami has, among other persons, has given us sort of a magic formula for being in the material world and at the same time being Krishna consciousness. He writes in Nectar of Devotion, Nasaktasya Vishamya Tarhamupayunjita Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagya Uchite, which means that one should not be attached to anything, but at the same time accept everything in relation to Krishna. Thus one is rightly situated above possessiveness. So this gives us a kind of formula for living in the material world but not being attached to it. I think it says somewhere in the Bible that one should be in the world, but not of it, not of the world. There are many sects, not many, but some sects that do this on a kind of ad hoc basis. For example, one sect says that you can't use mobile telephones within a community of their own. You have to go to a phone booth outside of the community. But this formula given by Rupa Goswami is like the key, is like one of the key verses to how to deal with the material world. It's not that everything is wrong or false. It's just that it's sometimes seen not in relationship to Krishna. Therefore, the devotee attitude is that we can use everything as long as it's related to Krishna. Cars, airplanes, computers, dictaphones, all these things were used even by Prabhupada. And sometimes we're challenged that we're decrying material life, and at the same time we're using all these material facilities and appliances like airplanes and cars and computers. But that's the answer. Rupa Goswami has given the secret, the formula, for us all to live in this material world, but not to be attached to it. To see everything in relation to Krishna. Otherwise, as he mentions, it's our renunciation is incomplete. So today is the disappearance day of Gopal Bhatta, so I'm going to be reading some of his biography. I think we'll be able to finish it all. I got this from Desire Tree, and they got it from, I think, the Chapati Temple, so I think it's bona fide. I'm sure it is. It's not completely all about Gopal Bhatta, but most of it is. So I'm going to be reading what I downloaded from the internet. I got from a devotee who downloaded it. The All-Merciful Sri Gaur Hari, I think we'll have time to finish it all. It's not very long. As he traveled from village to village throughout the south of India, continued to distribute love of God wherever he went. Hearing the nectarian names of Hari from his lotus mouth, thousands of men and women felt relief from the blazing fire of material existence. Various wretched, miserable, and fallen souls were completely rejuvenated, and thus they became virtuous and happy. While causing rains of love of God to fall anywhere and everywhere without consideration of time or place, Sri Gaurasundar came to the ancient holy place of Sri Rangashetra on an island in the middle of the Kaveri River. It's kind of interesting that there was a period in his early life, in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's early life, when he was living in the Navadvip area, where he was a very great scholar and didn't reveal who he really was, that he was actually a full manifestation of Krishna. He was thought to be a very great scholar, and he would defeat anyone he would meet. In fact, people, when they would see him, scholars, they would run the other way for fear of being defeated by the great Nimai Pandit. He was just a young boy at the time. But later on, at a certain point in his life, teenager, he revealed who he really was. So he played the part of an ordinary person for the earlier part of his life. And he even went to Gaya, where they offer pinda to the forefathers to sort of, get them to be free of ethereal bodies and get a better life. And so Lord Chaitanya, when he was a young man, visited all these holy places like Gaya, and here it mentions the temple of Sri Rangashetra. It was extremely large. The crest temple tower pierced the sky. Throughout the day and night, hundreds and thousands of pilgrims were going and coming to take darshan of Lord Ranganath. The temple hall resounded with the sounds of hundreds and thousands of Brahmins chanting Vedic hymns. In the midst of this scene, from Vaikuntha, entered Sri Gaurasundar, that's Lord Chaitanya, chanting the names of Krishna in his sweet voice. It defeated the voices of 10 million Gandharvas. Everyone in the temple became dumbstruck, amazed and thrilled with wonder. What unprecedented beauty! His bodily effulgence made molten gold appear lackluster. From his eyes, which are like the full moon and like the full-blown petals of the lotus flower, trickled down tears of ecstatic love. Every limb, every part of his body was filled with such exquisite grace that even the mind of Cupid gets stolen away. The Brahmins began to consider, quote, "Is this a demigod? Can such symptoms and emotions be found in human beings?" End quote. Again, resounding the halls with the transcendental vibrations of Sri Hari's name. When he came before the deity and fell down as a tree is blown down by the wind, some people thought that a mountain of gold was rolling on the ground. Sri Vyankata, seeing the divine personage, became restless with ecstasy. His heart being filled and flooded with devotion, he got up and began to move the crowds away so that the Lord could engage in chanting and dancing. When the Lord had regained his external consciousness after engaging in Sankirtan, Vyankata approached him and took the dust of his lotus feet. Mahaprabhu gazed towards him and saying, quote, Krishna, Krishna, embraced him, end quote, embraced him firmly. Sri Vyankata invited Mahaprabhu to come to his house, and having brought him there, very reverently washed his lotus feet along with other family members. He drank the water. Sri Balaji's house became filled with joy. It's very interesting to note that in Sri Chaitamrita, as well as in Chaitanya Bhagavat, the Lord is very fond of respecting prasadam. Shak was one of his favorite dishes, and it's an interesting thing that God has organs of action, hands and feet and mouth, and that he can eat and enjoy. So it's not a sort of dry. Most people of the world have a kind of non-personal perception of God. Something God is love, something God is nature. But in any case, people who are very devoted even think that God doesn't have a personality, and he can't accept anything, can't eat, can't walk. He's just a force. So Mahaprabhu came to Rangakshetra on the Christian year 1511. Vyankata Bhatta had two brothers, Tirumala Bhatta and Prabodhananda Saraswati. They all belonged to the Ramanuja Sampradaya, and Prabodhananda Saraswati was a Tridandi sannyasi of that order. Vyankata Bhatta had a son named Gopal. Now we're getting into Gopal Bhatta, who was then just a child. When the boy came to offer his obeisances at the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu picked him up and very affectionately seated him in his lap. Mahaprabhu would call Gopal after he had finished his meal and offer his remnants to the boy. In this way he prepared him for the position of Acharya. After remaining at Vyankata Bhatta's house during the 4 months of the rainy season, Chaturmasya, Mahaprabhu prepared to continue his journey to the south. Vyankata Bhatta's house began to ebb in a tide of tears in anticipation of his departure. Gopal fell at his lotus feet in a dead faint. Therefore Mahaprabhu remained for a couple of more days in order to console the boy. Being pleased with Gopal Bhatta Goswami's sincere service and devotion, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu initiated him and ordered him to move to Vrindavan after the disappearance of his parents and perform bhajan and rite. He instructed him to serve his mother and father and always engage in chanting Krishna's glories, and thereafter to come to Vrindavan. Very quickly, Gopal became expert in grammar, poetry, and rhetoric, and then began his study of Vedanta. His uncle, Prabodhananda, specifically began to instruct him from the devotional scriptures, Bhakti Shastra. Gopal Bhatta always remained thinking of the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu and when he might again be able to meet him. At the same time, however, he couldn't leave his aged mother and father. Finally, having reached their final days, they called their son Gopal and instructed him to go to the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu in Vrindavan. Then, while meditating on his lotus feet themselves, they went to join him in his eternal Leela. At the age of 30, Gopal Bhatta Goswami came to Vrindavan, and having missed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this greatly saddened him. Thus Gopal set out for Vrindavan, and when he arrived there, Rupa Goswami immediately sent word to Mahaprabhu to inform him of Gopal's arrival. I just wanted to mention that many of you probably know this, but Prabhupada, after he took sannyas, used to gaze out of his little room in the Radha Damodar temple at the tomb of Rupa Goswami. It's been modernized and since then, but he got a great inspiration. And in 1972, he completed the work Nectar of Devotion, which was Rupa Goswami's magnum opus, you might say. His great rendering. And Prabhupada mentioned in lecturing on this book that it should be read not just once or twice, but many times by all devotees, over and over and over again. It contains many detailed instructions about devotional service and how it should be executed. Prabhupada got a lot of inspiration from Rupa Goswami. And Gopal Bhatta, in case you don't know, is one of the 6 Goswamis. And Prabhupada said that in order to realize Krishna and to obtain love of Krishna, we have to go through the 6 Goswamis, because they gave us detailed instructions. And once, when I was in London, I saw a card on the temple was very near the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. There was a little card on the board that said, Jiva Goswami is the world's greatest philosopher. He's one of the 6 Goswamis, the world's greatest philosopher. Greater than Socrates, greater than Aristotle, greater than anyone. I wish that I had taken a picture of that, because it was actually written and it was issued by the School of Oriental and African Studies. Anyway, at the age of 30, Gopal Bhatta Goswami came to Vrindavan, and having missed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this saddened him. Thus Gopal set out for Vrindavan, and when he arrived there, Rupa Goswami immediately sent word to Mahaprabhu to inform him of Gopal's arrival there. Mahaprabhu had previously indicated to Rupa and Sanatan that Gopal Bhatta would one day come there to Vrindavan. So upon his arrival, they treated him with the same care and affection they would their own brother. They immediately became lifelong companions. However, the all-knowing Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, received word that Gopal Bhatta had come to Vrindavan. So he was very pleased and sent that messenger with the Lord's personal wooden sitting plank, hoki, which he had used along with a pair of his undergarments and one of his upper cloths, uttara or chadar. Quote, having received these gifts, Gopal Bhatta was in ecstasy, and he worshipped them as the prasad, tadiya, of Mahaprabhu. End quote. I don't know where this quote comes from. When he would worship his deities, he would sit on that wooden plank. This piri, wooden seat, and Mahaprabhu's clothes are still being worshipped at Radharaman Mandir. Gopal Bhatta, like Rupa and Sanatan, had no fixed residence and would spend the night in various kunjas, forest groves. He spent his time studying the scriptures and composing various literatures. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's disappearance, Gopal Bhatta Goswami felt intense separation from the Lord. To relieve his devotee, the Lord instructed Gopal Bhatta in a dream, quote, if you want my darshan, then make a trip to Nepal, end quote. In Nepal, Gopal Bhatta bathed in the famous Kali Gandaki river. Upon dipping his water pot in the river, he was surprised to see several shaligram shilas enter his pot. He dropped the shilas back into the river, but the shilas re-entered his pot when he refilled it. After emptying and refilling his water pot for the 3rd time, Gopal Bhatta Goswami found 12 shaligram shilas sitting there. Thinking this must be the Lord's mercy, he kept all the shilas and returned to Vrindavan. Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami used to worship 12 shaligram shilas. Wherever he would go, he would bring them with him in a piece of cloth tied at the corner. One day, a wealthy man, Seth, came to Vrindavan and offered Gopal Bhatta a variety of clothing and ornaments for his shaligrams. Being very impressed with the Goswami, he wanted his darshan and to render some service, which he presented in the form of some valuable cloths and ornaments. However, Gopal Bhatta couldn't use these for his round-shaped shaligrams, so he advised the donor to give the deity decorations to someone else. But the Seth insisted. Gopal Bhatta kept the cloths and ornaments with his shilas. While Gopal Bhatta Goswami was absorbed in remembering how the half-man, half-lion form of the Supreme Lord had manifested in the pillar of Hiranyakashipu's palace, he prayed in transcendental lamentation to the Lord, quote, O my Lord, you are very merciful, and always fulfill the desires of your devotees. I wish to serve you in your form, having arms and legs, and blissful smiling face with lotus eyes. If I had a deity, then I would be able to decorate him so nicely with these clothes and ornaments. In the evening, after offering some bhoga and arti to his shaligram shilas, Gopal Bhatta put them to rest, covering them with a wicker basket. Late in the night, Gopal Bhatta took a little rest, and then, in the early evening, went to take bath in the Yamuna river. Returning from his bath, he uncovered the shalagrams in order to render the puja for Shilas and the deity. The, quote, Damodar Shila, end quote, had manifested as the beautiful threefold bending form of Sri Bangananda Krishna. Floating in the ocean of ecstasy, he fell to the ground in order to offer his dandavats, and then recited various prayers and hymns. This wonderful event of the appearance day of Radha Raman happened on the day after Sri Nrsimha Chaturdasi, and is celebrated on that day accordingly. That day, they offer 500 liters of milk for the Lord's pleasure, and many other sweets and different things. The Radha Raman Temple has the highest standard of deity worship in all of Raj. Of course, that's a debatable point. Some would say Krishna Balaram has a higher standard. But anyway. When Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, as well as many others, received news of the miraculous event, they came running to see the Lord. Gazing on the Lord's transcendental form, which bewildered all the living entities of the many various planets, they all bathed him with their tears. The deity, whom the Goswamis named, quote, Sri Radha Raman Deva, end quote, made his appearance on the full moon day of Vaishakha in the year 1542. Except for Vrindavan Devi, Sri Radha Ramanji is the only one of the original deities in Vrindavan who never left to go to Jaipur. Sri Radha Ramanji is being worshipped in Vrindavan near Niduban Kunj in the compound of the temple. The deity is called Radha Raman, although physically there is no apparent deity of Radha there. I'll read that again. The deity is called Radha Raman, although physically there is no apparent deity of Radha there. As one can see from there's a picture that I wasn't able to get. Sri Radha Raman Deva, unlike the other deities, has very delicate features, including fingernails and even teeth. On the backside of his body, parts of the original Shalagram Shila, from which he manifested himself, can be seen. There is a story that the small son of one of the Sevites was playing with the deity once and put a small stick in one ear of the deity and pushed it through out the other ear. The stick, however, had blood on it, and that boy died, vomiting blood that very day. Well, so much for sleeves. If you ever have the great good fortune to attend Snan Yatra festival in Sri Vrindavan Dham, then it is a must that you visit the Sri Radha Raman Temple on that day. The temperatures are hot and dry in the 40 plus centigrade area, and much anticipation of seeking out cooling water pervades the thoughts of Vrindavan's hot summer. At the temple, the merciful Ramanji has made a provision so that first he takes his transcendental bath right at the front of the altar for all to see. But then, after he has taken in his expanded kindness, the pujaris turn on the sprinkler system that surrounds the open courtyard. The fan in the middle is even equipped with pipes to pour out cooling water as it rotates at high speed, inundating all the devotees taking the darshan of the Lord with great pleasure. It is truly my favorite place, whoever wrote this I don't know, in the world for Snan Yatra. Sri Radha Ramanji Ki Jai. In some discussion with the present day guardians of the temple and deity, they told me that some scientists had come to examine the deity and propound their doubts that he was self-manifested as the devotee state. They examined the deity under the supervision of the devotees, but could find no evidence of carving. About today's descendants. We're just going to finish on time. Once Sri Gopal Bhatta went to Hardwar. As he was returning, suddenly a downpour started, and thus he took shelter at the house of one Brahmin. The Brahmin was very devoted and very carefully began to serve Gopal Bhatta, who thus became very pleased. At this, as this Brahmin had no children, Sripad Gopal Bhatta Goswami blessed him that he might have a son who would be a devoted follower of Lord Hari. The Brahmin replied out of gratitude that, quote, "My first son I will send to you in order to serve you," end quote, unquote. When Gopal Bhatta returned from bathing in the Yamuna one day, he saw a young boy sitting on the door of his kutir. When the boy saw the Goswamiji approaching, he got up and then fell down to offer his dandavats. Sripad Gopal Bhatta Goswami inquired who the boy was, to which he replied, quote, "My home was in Devandyagram with Saranapur near Hardwar. My father has sent me here to serve you. My name is Gopinath," quote unquote. Then Gopal Bhatta could remember the time when he went to Hardwar many years ago. So this boy remained with him and very carefully began to serve him. Eventually, he became known as Sri Gopinath Pujari Goswami. And as he served the Radha Ramandi Deva deity through his life as an unmarried brahmachari, his younger brother Sri Damodar Das, along with his family, accepted initiation from Sri Gopinathji and also became engaged in the service of the deity. Sri Damodar Das's three sons were named Harinath, Mathuranatha, and Hari Rama. It is from these family members of Gopinath's brother that today's guardians of the Radharaman Gosais so nicely maintain the service of Sri Sri Radharamanji. Sri Gopal Bhatta's devotion was so special, his devotion so profound, that the Lord appeared for him in this special form. Not only that, as if in confirmation of the pastimes of the Lord and Mahaprabhu's being directly Radha Krishna, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahi Anya. In his worship of Sri Radha Raman, he would sometimes see that he had taken the form of Sri Gaurasundar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, quote, becoming subservient to the love of Sri Gopal Bhatta. Sri Radharaman would sometimes accept the form of Sri Gaurasundar, end quote. Sri Gopal Bhatta was the initiating guru of Srinivasa Acharya Prabhu. Sripad Gopal Bhatta Goswami was very learned, trained in Pancharatra, coming in the learned family of Venkata Bhatta in the Sri Vaishnava line. He wrote many books, including Sat Sandarbha Karika, Sri Krishna Vallabha, Krishna Karnamrita, Sat Kriya Saradipika, a brilliant work on Vaishnava Samkara Vidi, and Lagu Hari Bhakti Vilas with the Digdarshini Tika. From this work, Sri Sanatana Goswami compiled the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is now followed by all Gaudiya Vaishnavas. It is said, quote, out of affection for Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami compiled the famous Vaishnava Smriti titled Hari Bhakti Vilas and published it under Gopal Bhatta Goswami's name. Gopal Bhatta Goswami resided for 45 years in Sri Dham, Vrindavan. But out of great humility, he requested Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj not to mention his name in the classic work Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Gopal Bhatta Goswami serves as Guna Manjari. In the Gaura Gonadisha Deepika too, it is mentioned that in the eternal pastimes of Radha and Krishna, Gopal Bhatta Goswami's name is Braja Leela. In Braja Leela, the Gopal Bhatta's, I'll read that again. Gopal Bhatta's Goswami serves as Guna Manjari. In the Ganadesha Deepika too, it is mentioned that in the eternal pastimes of Radha and Krishna, Gopal Bhatta Goswami's name in Braja Leela has been given as Guna Manjari. His birth was on the day of the dark and fortnight in the month of Pausa in the year 1503 Christian, 1425 Saka. So that's the little biographical sketch, anyway, which we're honoring because it's his disappearance date. It's just exactly our time to stop lecturing, but we do have a little time for questions if anyone wants to ask anything or say anything. Now's the time. Yes?
I was wondering why were the six Goswamis chosen as the six Goswamis and not all the Goswamis included contemporary like Krishnadas Kaviraj or Gokuna Goswami?
Well, why is anyone ever chosen is the greater question. Just like the gopis are said to have perfected the Madhurya Rasa. Why have they been, they haven't exactly been chosen or selected, they just have that ability. And so the six Goswamis, they wrote very voluminously, and people like Sanatana and Rupa gave detailed instructions of how we should actually behave. So they're considered to be very, extremely important. Although Prabhupada did say that we should read books of all the acharyas, translations, they usually wrote in the Sanskrit language, and translations of devotees in good standing are not that easy to find. That but the Nectar of Devotion was translated, and Prabhupada lectured on it extensively in Vrindavan, Los Angeles, and Bombay, and then Bombay. So they weren't exactly, the Goswamis weren't exactly chosen, but they had the ability to inspire. And they were known to be very realized souls, and they had the ability to inspire future generations. So they weren't exactly chosen, but they stand out because they are of their great realizations. I don't know if it's the kind of thing that can be discussed at length, but that's a very, very difficult concept, that someone is chosen or selected. It does happen, and sometimes Krishna may even be accused of selecting his followers. You know, some are better than others, and so on and so forth. So it's a very tricky kind of situation. We have to love all beings, even animals and insects, and things that grow and don't move. But at the same time, from a relative point of view, some things are greater than others. So both things exist. It's kind of like achintya bheda bheda tattva, inconceivably one and different. I mean, it's inconceivable for me, so I think it's pretty, it's just, I mean, and that phrase is used, achintya bheda bheda tattva, achintya meaning inconceivable. So it's not just for aspirants like myself, but for everyone. It's just an inconceivable thing. Just like in the world, everything in this material world is measurable and quantifiable, but at the same time there are many things that are inconceivable. Like we don't know a lot of things about the moon and the sun and the planets and just matter itself. It's inconceivable. But people think they can conceive of everything. They can measure everything. They can quantify everything. They can describe everything. But it's actually not possible. There is an element of reality that's achintya, that's inconceivable. And I think choosing is one of those things. Any other comments? Or yes?
Pretty much just ordered to go about this type of experience. We understand it means just because they were devotees, because there's other examples with Raghunath where he ran away from his parents.
So what was your...
I guess if we look after our parents only if they're devotees, or take care of our holidays.
Well, again, it's one of those, I mean, Srila Prabhupada sometimes instructed people to look after their parents who weren't devotees. There was an incident, I think Deva Gaurahari spoke about this on the Panihati festival, that there was a period when Raghunath Goswami, his father and his brother, they were doing something that wasn't exactly legal. It was they were tax collectors, and they were keeping a larger portion than maybe they should have. And somehow the chief collector, who was their boss, was a Muslim, and he developed a kind of conflictual relationship with Hiranya Mujumdar. That was Gopal Bhatta's, Ranganath's father, and his brother, Hiranya Govindar and Mujumdar and Govinda Mujumdar. Anyway, they got wind that this Muslim was coming to arrest them. They heard about this, so they fled. And then Raghunath Swami was left alone in that house. I mean, this is narrated, I think, in the Chaitanya Chaitamrita. And but he settled the whole matter right then and there with this very inimical person who didn't like the Majumdar brothers at all. And he developed kind of an adversarial relationship with them. But Raghunath Goswami was so intelligent that anasaktasya vishayam, that he's known to be very intelligent in worldly matters. And even though he was, undeveloped at that time, because he was just a teenager, he settled the matter, even though it was a very vicious thing. And it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita that when the chief tax collector, saw Raghunath's face, he just melted. Just by seeing his face, he melted and forgave him and his uncle and brother for everything that went on. And anyways, a lot of things that devotees did that weren't exactly proved devotionally or materially, but they nonetheless they did them because it was for Krishna. Okay, one more, I think.
At the beginning of the Bhagavatam class, you made a statement. I was wondering if you don't mind just repeating again about living in the material world.
Well, I think Rupa Goswami was the one who penned that phrase, anasaktasya vishayam yataramupa yunjita. And I think there's two verses there. The second one is prapanjikata vidya. The idea is that we have to be detached from everything, but to accept everything in relationship to Krishna. And that's the secret formula for living in the material world. And Raghunath Swami exhibited this power, as did a lot of the Goswamis. They were not only, it's one of the 26 qualities of a devotee, to not be neglectful in ordinary affairs, to be expert, daksha. So even though we kind of live in this, we try to live in the spiritual world, we try to be jivan mukta, we also can't neglect our bodies or everyday affairs. We can't be ignorant, and devotees and when this event occurred here, which was on Rath Yatra, it was the open day, because we had a big screen, a very large screen video. People got the impression that devotees can be sophisticated. They can be intelligent. They can be educated. They can be cultured. So they got that impression, instead of just being a group of people who have good food and they live a clean life, but they're more than just escapists. They have good food and they sing and dance, but they got a greater impression. Like sometimes we have things to say about things, about issues of the day. I mean, we do. Sometimes it requires a lot of digging and intelligence, but it's there. And the Goswamis, especially Gopal Bhatta and Sanatana Rupa, all of them, they exhibited this quality of being very expert in dealing with the world. Even though they decried the saying that Jagan, what is it? Brahma Satya Jagan Mitra, that the world is false and the only true life is the spiritual world. But that devotees don't accept that phrase, Brahman Mitra, Jagat Satya, that the world is false. It's not false, but it has its utility. Does that help? Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.